I'm so excited to talk about this today. Hi everybody, it's AlsoAshley. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm gonna get way too excited talking about Animorphs. First off, this is a skort, not a skirt, so there's shorts under here. So everybody chill out, don't wanna hear anything about it. It's not my fault I'm this thick, okay? And yeah, I am very excited to talk about this. Animorphs kind of shaped my childhood growing up. It was my young adult reading series. It was something I was obsessed with, and I'm pretty sure it shaped what kind of content I like to consume as an adult now. I love Animorphs so much that the very first time I drank when I was 21, I waited until I was 21, I had a few too many rum and cokes, and then I sat down all of my friends, and it was my birthday, so they were there to do whatever I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was sit them all down for 3 hours and explain the entire plot of the Animorphs novels, from beginning to end. Admittedly, I hadn't read the entire series, so some of the holes I kind of had to fill in myself. But, you know, considering I was super out of it, I feel like I did a pretty good job, from what I remember. If you've been following my YouTube, you may have noticed that I'm pretty chaotic and I kind of jump all over the place. Hot girl Instagrams, bad commercials, general thank yous, Jason Statham's. But I love that because it gives me every opportunity to talk about whatever I want. And I've been wanting to talk about Animorphs for a while. Not just because it's fun and I want to talk about it, but also because of the light trans themes running throughout it, even if the author wasn't quite aware of that at the time. That's right, ooh, Animorphs. It's all part of that newfangled woke garbage that just started up. There was nothing like this before 1996. Oh my god. I am old. So anyway, the chaoticness of my channel allows me to touch on a bunch of different stuff. But specifically, I've realized over the last couple months, I'm starting to find a niche. And one of my friends best summed this up, so I'm just going to quote them and not give them credit, and pretend it was me who's thinking about this. They said, and I'm not quoting because I said this channel of yours is amazing content creation and social media at large through the lens of transness. Thanks, Dana. I thought that was a really great description, and it really does hit what I've discovered my channel is becoming. A very wide range of topics, but always with a little bit of that transness lens. Because surprise, I'm trans. But anyway, I really like that description of kind of what I'm doing, so I'm going to steal it, which I can do because, you know, like I said, I was the one who said it. So reading that actually kind of inspired me to think like, well, what else could I look at through a trans lens? And as was established, when my brain is free-floating around on alcohol or just in thought, apparently I always wander over to Animorphs. So that's a very long way for me to say, we're talking about Animorphs today. Strap in. One of the first things I started doing was doing a little bit of research because it'd been a long time since I'd read any of this, but also I just kind of wanted to refresh my memory. Shockingly, didn't really need to refresh much. I was way too aware of a lot of what was going on. Like, I can't believe I remember character names and aliens and weird alien names like Hork-Bajir, Yirk. That's living rent-free in my brain forever. And this is a fun aside because I really wanted to touch on, well, what other kind of media or creation as I was growing up, you know, touched on subjects of transness or fluidness, body dysphoria, you know, aspects of that. And even subjects like body horror, especially when it comes to that. But my brain started jumping back in time and I realized Animorphs wasn't my first confrontation with feelings like that, with out-of-body experiences or, oh, I wish I could morph into a different version of myself. I was suddenly struck by lightning. For years, I have mentioned to my therapist, yes, I see a therapist, it's healthy, that when I was a kid in grade school, I remembered a book with a cover where a kid was looking into the mirror and a female version of himself was looking back. And it went something like, blah, 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 that was the name, Are You a Girl? In my entire life, I've just kind of had to accept I'll never actually track that book down. Maybe I imagined it. But excited. In my Animorphs research, I just somehow stumbled across this book. Here it is. Marvin Redpost, Are You a Girl? I found it. Like I said, this was just a little bit of an aside. I think I wasn't ready for Animorphs in 2nd or 1st grade whenever I saw this book. This book existing in my school was incredible for me. I had gone my entire life having these feelings, and until I saw it in this book, in this form, I had no way of encountering it in the real world. So tiny little baby Ash was running around, hiding this book from his classmates because I lived in a small town, and trying to read it on the side out of the eyes and perspectives of everyone else around me. That's kind of a sweet story, but on another level, it's a little bit sad for me to recount. Because what that means is when I was that age, part of me knew I couldn't talk about this with other people. I would be considered strange or weird or wrong, and it was best I kept it secret and hidden and let nobody else see it. I'm not gonna cry. Okay, I'm getting hit with emotion. Give me a second. Okay. Okay, I'm good. Did not mean to get that emotional about that, but I did want to talk about it because I think that book informs a bit of how I'm going to approach my Animorphs conversation. That book very directly addresses gender. I don't have to try and connect the dots. I don't have to guess what the author was maybe thinking. I don't have to question if the author even knew what they were writing. Very obviously, that book addresses gender and the difference between male and female, and the difference between boy and girl, etc., etc. Genuinely incredibly helpful for me as a kid. And I am very thankful my library happened to stock that book. Absolutely incredible author, by the way. I posted this on Blue Sky and it blew up and everyone was just gushing about what else this author has done. So go look him up. Amazing. But I bring up that book because, like I said, it's very directly addressing gender. A lot of other media content, especially when you're going through this growing up, likely isn't going to be that direct. And it's more open to interpretation, or you latch onto something and kind of pull what you want from it. So despite whatever title I chose for this YouTube video, I don't think that K.A. Applegate directly wanted this to be a parallel to transness. I don't think she was directly trying to speak to me or other trans folks growing up. She has since kind of come out and been like, I like trans interpretations of the Animorphs. I think this is important to kind of establish early in this conversation, because I'm going to draw a lot of conclusions from the book itself and talk about how those feelings affected me and my own transness. But that doesn't make it 1000% true. So if you're a cis straight person who has totally different interactions with this media, that is perfect. That is great. You know, trans people don't want to come in and rewrite history. And they don't want to come in and rewrite media, despite some content creators doing that. But I'm saying it's best to look at what the author's intention was, and then add what you were able to pull from it. That's the beauty of art, right? Artimorphs. Always have to slip something like that in. Stupid puns, it's my whole life. Maybe that's the truth. I really just made this YouTube channel to make really shitty puns. And make you have to hear them, my friends. So the initial section I'm saying here is, this is my perspective, and it could be a lot of yours as well. And anyone who pops in here to get mad at me about this, guess what? We're talking about kids turning into bottlenose dolphins and hawks. I think we all get a little leeway on how we want to interpret that. That was a very long intro, and I'm glad you stuck around with me, because we're about to dive in. That's going to be the best part. If you know Animorphs, you're excited. If you don't know Animorphs, I'm going to start describing it to you, and you might just be like, oh, what is this? What is this weird shit? Let's do it. Back in my day, there was this thing called the Scholastic Book Fair. You'd get out of class, you'd go to the Scholastic Book Fair. It was usually in the computer lab with the Oregon Trail. And you'd run around in all the colorful books and art. I'm going to find pictures. You're going to see it, and all this nostalgia is going to hit you. If you're my age. Oh, God, is this the most defining of, like, what era I grew up in? You're going to solve it. But yeah, you used to run around in these Scholastic book fairs and just buy the cheapest shit imaginable, but also pick up a bunch of books. Now, for me, the most eye-drawing book I would ever witness in these was the Animorphs books. I mean, just look at these covers. How do you look at that and not want to pick it up and see what's going on? Hopefully my thumbnail for this video is up to snuff. But me, being tiny little baby Ash, decided to pick up one of these books for the first time and read it. And my life was changed forever. The general plot of Animorphs is that a bunch of teenagers end up running across a crashed spaceship one night after hanging out in the mall. Out of the ship comes this crazy blue deer alien thing with stalks for eyes. And this guy's basically like, hey, guess what? I'm here because a invading alien species is already on Earth taking over human bodies. They're called Yeerks. They shove into your ear, and then they take over your mind. From that point on, that body is known as a controller because the alien itself has taken over full control. And the person in there is now stuck in the back, almost like they're watching a movie of their own life, controlled by somebody else. This blue alien comes forward to the 5 kids, Jake, Marco, Cassie, Rachel, Tobias. How do I know all these names and events? I was obsessed. And this blue alien, known as an Andalite, holds out this little cube and says, the way that we fight these things is we have this technology that allows us to touch animals, absorb their DNA, and then lets us change into those creatures for a period of 2 hours. If you are in animal form for any longer than that 2 hours, you will become permanently stuck. Your DNA will restructure, and you will be that creature with your own mind inside of it forever. No going back. By the way, those aliens, they have to leave the host body about every 3 days, bathe in a pool, recharge, and then jump back in. So despite the fact that much of the human population might be overrun by these things, there is a chance that everyone can be saved. Yeerks actually end up starving if they don't go swim in that pool. But yeah, anyway, I'm a big blue alien. Here's all these crazy DNA powers. These other ships about to fly in and take me out, so get out of here. Go. Save the world. Now, you may have noticed right away, that's a pretty dark plot line for a young adult novel. There's already a bunch of body horror in there, existential crisis on what being you is, the idea of trust being broken, that maybe people aren't who they say they are, knowing that aliens are out there wanting to conquer you, witnessing the death of that creature as they're leaving. It also touches on, I don't know, child soldiers, war in general, moral ambiguity, and then the Yeerks being a metaphor for forced conformity, control, erasure. That's all just in like the first couple pages of this book, and I f***ing loved it. It's f***ing wild. So I immediately was all about this, and I got absorbed into these books and just got so excited about every new release that was coming out. And with that being kind of the initial jump into the plot, let me just tell you a little history on the books. The first one was released in June of 1996, and the series ran all the way through 2001. There were 54 main books, each marked by a unique cover like this. Amazing. And then there are a bunch of spin-off stuff, including like a Choose Your Own Adventure, and then little like Chronicles book, like the Hork-Bajir Chronicles that comes to my head just out of nowhere. I bet that book exists. If it doesn't, I'm going to be embarrassed. Oh, nope, that's it. These books also sold over 35 million copies worldwide, which is crazy. And like I said, you just heard me list all the crazy themes going on, and it gets really dark. And this was aimed at, middle readers, young adults, and maybe a little younger if you're like me and you picked up Jurassic Park for the first time when you were like 8. And were like, yeah, this is the first book I'm going to read. And of course, the author of this series, K.A. Applegate, who, as I mentioned, has openly supported trans interpretations of this work, which I'll get into here in a bit. But I'm too excited to talk about the books themselves and just how they affected me and the plot and all that stuff. Oh, you can tell I'm excited. Here we go. I'm about to go into it. They also did a short-lived TV series for a while, and that sucked balls. I mean, I haven't watched it since. Ooh, maybe I'll do that. You guys want to watch the Animorphs series with me? Watch me cringe and be really sad and probably do the thing where I'm like, well, actually, in the book. Well, actually, Jake in the book. Oh, well, actually, if you want, I already mentioned I didn't read every single book in the series, but I'm pretty sure I came close to reading about 75% of them, and then I got wrapped up in my own life. So years later, when I was shopping for Christmas presents at a Hastings, there's a reference, I found a copy of the last book on the shelf, and I actually just sat down right there and I read it. And I'll get to the end of the series in a bit, but let's go back and talk about why I love this series so much in general. I hate to say it in this way, but part of the reason is it's just so dark. It was addressing themes that I didn't see in any other form of media when I was that age, or that I really had access to. So it almost felt like a little secret for me, you know? There's just like straight up battles and war and body horror and destruction and murder and aliens and death and and teen drama and romance and interpersonal conflict and intrigue and mystery and terrifying everything. It was all just f***ing wonderful. Did not shy away from mature themes. And some people might argue kids shouldn't be addressing those kinds of things. I'm so happy I was reading in this format. It really made me think. It expanded my brain. It changed how I approached things. The idea of trust and what that meant. Responsibility, how the world isn't just black and white and that a lot of what you're dealing with is morally gray. There's all these aspects of the book series that just opened my mind in a way that I don't think any other book series would have. As far as characters, there was Jake, who was basically the leader and burdened with responsibility. Cassie, the kind, gentle, caring one that was really close to animals. Rachel, who seemed like a ditzy gymnast cheerleader, but was actually like the fiercest warrior and total badass. Marco, who was basically the comic relief, but actually had a very warm heart and cared the most about almost everybody. And then Tobias, the outcast kid who ends up getting stuck as a hawk. There is a plot line in this book about a kid named David who discovers all the other teenagers' secrets. And as opposed to silencing him, the gang basically decides, we'll try to bring him into the group, help him become one of us, at least give him an opportunity to fight back. That whole plot line involves responsibility, basically. While all 5 of the main cast are constantly struggling, fighting, using their powers to fight back against evil, David comes along and is basically just like, why is that your responsibility? You have these amazing powers. You're not using them for fun or to your advantage. You're not using this power to further your life. What's wrong with all of you? And the book sits you down and kind of argues from both sides for a while until you realize that David, in his lust for power and irresponsibility, starts abusing his powers, ends up turning against the rest of the gang. You get this morally ambiguous character whose perspective you understand, but you also put yourself in the place of the situation. And it really makes you think, like, would I be on one side or the other? Would I be able to do what these kids are doing? Would I be able to stand up for these morals? Or would I cave and just do what feels right in the moment and not think about the future? It's just a lot to handle as a kid. And here's the kicker. David fully turns on them. And then all 5 of our main characters, well, 6 technically, I'll get to that, fight against him to the point where he almost kills several of them. And then they end up trapping him as a rat for the rest of his life. And because in animal form they communicate via telepathy, they realize they can't just leave him about because he will definitely rat on them. Oh, look at that. I did a silly pun, and then I tell you, yeah, they end up bringing David to an island out in the ocean and leaving him there with a bunch of other rats to live out the rest of his life. That's f***ed. That's in a kid's series. I read that as a kid. It's fucking awesome. But I don't know, that really made me think like, maybe it's best if you think about others and the fate of the world and not just about yourself and what you can get out of things, because, I don't want to be a rat on an island. Don't be a rat on an island. Be a hawk in the sky. Tobias is stuck as a hawk, by the way. Let's get into that. I'm about to jump into the transness, but let me wrap up the plot really quick. The crazy thing about the end of this series is that they do succeed, but it comes at massive costs. I'm not going to ruin it. I'm not going to talk about the actual final result, where everybody ends up, but kind of the ultimate conclusion at the end of this book is like, war changes you. These kids will never be the same. Being burdened with such responsibility when you're just a teenager will forever change you, makes you lose your childhood and never be who you were. Loss, death, shapes who you are. Responsibility is a burden. It's just all these goddamn themes going on that just really opened my eyes as a kid to just more of the reality of the world. It's crazy. And then you come along and sprinkle in a bunch of transness. Okay, so let's change the mood and talk about Tobias. If you've read Animorphs, you already know where I'll be going with this. He's that character. Awkward, kind of quiet, always on the outside looking in. And honestly, the more you look at his story, the more it feels ridiculously transcoded. From the start, Tobias doesn't really fit in anywhere. School, no. Home, definitely not. Even in his friend group, he's kind of floating around the edges, seemingly waiting for something, and not sure what it is yet. And then bam, alien tech happens, and he gets stuck as a hawk forever on day one of the war against the Yeerks. And now he's in a body he wasn't prepared for. Once he's a hawk, Tobias begins living through the emotional arcs that many trans folks go through. Dysphoria. Yeah, he remembers being human, eating food, shaking hands, smiling, but those things just aren't a part of his life anymore. In a way, he's grieving what he lost. But there's also the euphoria. He can fly, he has super sharp senses, there's this rush, this joy in what his new body can do, and he realizes that maybe this war was truly what had been missing in his life this entire time. I mean, that's definitely gender euphoria. Also, the way people see him changes. Some accept him, some don't. Plenty just don't get it. Eventually, there are also dual identity struggles. In a rare occurrence, Tobias is able to change back into his human form with the same rules applied previously. 2 hours, but stay any longer and you'll be stuck human forever. So he can be human again for short bursts, but it's literally on a timer, and he never chooses to return permanently into his human form. Some trans folks would agree that this situation is like having to code switch your gender presentation for certain spaces, always aware the clock's ticking, and even feeling uncomfortable in the body you're no longer familiar with. Then there's the romance and self-reflection. Rachel and him have a romance throughout the series, and she loves him for him, hawk body and all. But Tobias always questions whether he's enough in the form he's chosen. And that insecurity is incredibly relatable. And honestly, the best part in the series is that it doesn't treat this whole thing as tragic. It's not, oh, poor Tobias, his life is ruined. It's complicated, it's hard, but he also finds meaning and even joy in his new life. He redefines what a full life looks like for himself, on his terms. K.A. Applegate basically gave us a whole allegory about living in a body that doesn't match the world's expectations, navigating grief and joy at the same time, and learning to own it. Tobias is literally out here 30 years ago, flying above us, giving us the trans representation that the 90s didn't even know was happening. Okay, how was that? Was that emotional? We're gonna go back to me on screen. Okay. At a certain point in the series, they end up running across another one of the Andalites, who's a younger one, who comes to Earth looking for his brother, who is the one who gave them all powers in the first place. And he can't just exist in the state that he's in, right? Might be noticed. So in order to appear human, he ends up taking DNA from all 5 of the main characters to make a version of himself that basically looks like all of them combined. His name is Axe. Axe is male presenting, but multiple times throughout the book, they kind of describe how he looks, and depending on what perspective each character is describing him from, because every book was actually told from a different character's perspective every time. It was great. What a fun concept. They would describe Axe as having traits that they might see from themselves in this human version of him. You picking up on some thoughts and feelings I might have had growing up reading this? The way the science works is basically you have to touch an animal, absorb its DNA, and then you can change into an exact copy of the animal. So of course, growing up reading these books, I'm like, oh God, if I had that power, how cool would it be to become or morph into a female version of myself? Wouldn't that be crazy? What a crazy thing to think about. I'm sure everyone thinks about that. That's just not me. I'm not really seriously thinking about it. It's not like a serious thought. But like, what if, though? Like, what if? But like, what if, though? Like, what if I could turn into a female version of myself, That'd be silly. Guess what? I did it. But the idea of this alien being a version of himself in a different body, really fun themes to think on. There's no way you can't kind of interpret some of this as transness. Taking on a different form but still being yourself. Transness. It's not really crazy to think that a lot of people felt those feelings, had those thoughts when reading this series. It's a little bit understated, but at the same time, it's a pretty big statement. That David character actually ends up turning into a version of Rachel on multiple occasions, partially to mess with her. Wait for all those assholes in the comments to roll in and be like, oh, see, you're all tricking. See, he's becoming a woman. But that wasn't the point. It's almost like being a horrible human being is the problem if someone's that, and not just stereotyping an entire, group. Because if you were to judge the entire group of the Animorphs off of that one David Animorph, they'd all be awful, right? But we know, and we've established, they saved the world. There's multiple points, actually, in which gender was swapped or changed or exchanged in this series, and it was just played straight-faced. Honestly, the fact that it really wasn't treated as such a big deal is probably what helped me understand myself a lot more. The book didn't sit you down and be like, oh, morally wrong to do this, or, ooh, isn't this goofy and fun and playful? No, it was just part of the series and was used appropriately at different points. Also, when it comes to Axe being human, there was a lot of aspects of passing involved. Passing as a human, how to project that out for other people, how to blend in, how to fit within the structure of human society. What societal rules had humans created that he had to fit and fill to project the image he wanted to all of them? Also, Axe is like the ultimate gender-fluid creation, right? Fluidity, literally a combination of every gender in the group. There's a lot of aspects in this series about loss of control over your own body, when they're animals, feeling the instincts that are there or not. Also an aspect of loss of former body, if you were to be stuck in this new form, like Tobias does as a hawk. And just in general, there was this idea of not fitting into the box that society seemed to want to have you fit in. Again, as mentioned, Rachel's a really good example of this. Everyone else saw her as a certain form, but in her true self, there's often mention of her being a bear and being this almost masculine presence that wins battles and fights. And that's not treated as, oh, a girl's doing this, how crazy. It's just who she is, and everyone else accepts her as that. And actually, everyone else looks at the rest of the world and kind of thinks, how could you even perceive Rachel that way? That's just based off your interpretation. If you knew her, actually knew her, your entire opinion would change. So those are the structured bullet lists. For me, what did I feel about it? I have new perspectives, new context, new information, new intelligence that lets me look at this, interpret it in a new way. I kind of think that's the beauty of how I look back on how I experienced Animorphs, because at the time, it meant so much to me just because I found it so engaging and interesting and unique. And I don't think at the time I even understood that these themes of gender and identity were affecting me as much, or they were there, but I was kind of ignoring it, or not acknowledging it, or not realizing that desire that was actually under the surface that at the time I may have tried to shame or hide or not acknowledge. But here's the beauty of looking back on your life in the past from this future perspective. You get to look back on it in the same way that we all look at these books. I get to view my life as if it's this book or film, re-experiencing it. And I, as the outside perspective now, looking back, reading it, can reinterpret and experience everything I did in the past in a new light. So when I would reread scenes involving the gender morphing in these books, at the time I definitely didn't understand why I seemed to be so hung up on that. But now, looking back, I have a lot more context. I'm not rewriting my history. I'm simply understanding it better than I ever could have when I experienced it. I think a lot of trans and fluid folks do that. And I think we need to allow them to do that. And that's not changing your history or forcing your new perspective in. I think it's just recontextualizing and allowing you the space to see what you may not have back then. I think that's beautiful. Reading these books as a teenager, I thought they were just incredible sci-fi books with lots of gory violence and action and adventure and interpersonal drama. And at the time, I definitely got all of that out of it. But now, I gotta look back. I gotta look at that series and realize, like, damn, that is probably the most trans-heavy content I ever experienced growing up. It was exactly what everyone feared was gonna be in schools. Oh God, if a certain sect of our country only knew those books were on the shelf, turning our kids trans. Tranimorphs. But it's too late. It already happened. They got me. I don't know. Did I get too deep at the end there? I feel like the full conclusion coming back, relating my own life and maybe your own trans life as like a book you can go back and re-experience, recontextualize. That too much? Nah, I think it was great. I think that was a fun point to make with this series. So yeah, I could talk for another 2 hours about Animorphs. And who knows, maybe I will if this goes over well. Let me know what you think. Did you read the Animorphs? Did you watch the terrible TV series? Did you know the covers? A lot of folks just know the covers. They're like, oh, is that the thing with the lizard head thing? All I know is that I would love to hear your thoughts. Did you enjoy this? Do you want to hear more? Should I watch the Animorphs TV series? Watch me cringe? Let me know in the comments down below, and then be sure to like, subscribe, enjoy my channel, get it out there. I want to make more Animorphs content for you. So yeah, thank you for joining me. This was an absolute blast. So until I see you next time, be hot, resist fascism. God, there's just so much I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to go through like story beats and random stuff that just made me go like, oh, remember this? Remember when that happened? Remember when Tobias did that? Remember when Rachel ripped out the guts of a Hork-Bajir?